Welcome to the Sal and Scott podcast, the show that covers everything Bay Area sports has to offer and more. Now your hosts, Sal Castaneda and Scott Reese.
Episode 2 is on the air, the Sal and Scott podcast, because we are nothing if not creative.
Absolutely. I like that name because it's simple and it hasn't been taken because this podcast is starting in 21, right? So had we been, let's say we started podcasting, Scotty, in 12, something like that. We could have had any name we wanted.
Any name under the, it's like domain names, right?
However,
now you're out of luck.
Yeah. However, there is something that we're going to bring to the table because we are going to mentor some young people into how to get into this wonderful business we're in, right, Scott?
Are you and I qualified to mentor anybody?
People ask. I think you're right. We might be on the edge of that. People do ask, how do you get a job? I mean, look, you were on ESPN once. I don't want to toot your own horn because you're a Stanford guy, but I will toot your own horn. You were on ESPN. You've been successful in broadcasting, and a lot of people, and I always joke about this, don't get into broadcasting. Why would you want to do that? But some people want to do that. And I think, all kidding aside, it can be a fulfilling career if you like it. What if that's the only thing you really like? I mean, what if you really want to do it?
Then you need more varied interests. Look, this is what we do is, for the most part, a ton of fun.
Right.
We are incredibly fortunate, but it ain't easy. It's not all, smile for the camera like some people probably think.
Mm-hmm.
And more to your points, getting into the business and succeeding and getting where you want to go in the business is brutal.
Well, there's no one clear path. If someone were to ask me, how do you get to be on TV or on the radio or maybe even nowadays an Instagram influencer, no one can tell you these are the steps. For example, if you want to go to medical school, if you want to be a doctor, there are clear steps. You have to get an undergraduate degree in one of the hard sciences. You have to go to medical school. You have to pass the boards. Same for law school. There are prescribed steps. You could become a lawyer if you're smart enough or work hard enough, but not for this gig, not for any sort of television or media gig. Sometimes players get to walk on in, which I think is fine in sports. Like if you're Tony Romo and you walk into the number 2 analyst job at CBS, that's cool because people want to see that. But for the guy who is just a sportscaster or maybe the news guy, is there a prescribed way? There is not.
No, and I think you have to draw the distinction when you bring up Tony Romo. I think a lot of people are under the misconception that everybody who is on TV is essentially the same job, right? But couldn't be further from the truth, right? Tony Romo could not do the play-by-play job, right?
No.
But the play-by-play guy, Jim Nantz, could not do Tony Romo's job.
Correct.
Right? He didn't play the game. He can't break down. Maybe he can break down a 3-4 defense, but not to the extent of a guy who actually played football.
And even if he could, the viewers want to hear from a player. It could be that Jim Nantz could actually know more, but the viewers don't want to hear from Jim Nantz. They want to hear from a guy who played the game.
Well, it's credibility. And look, I think Romo's great. There are... We have the full spectrum, right, of former pro athletes on TV and radio, and some of them are fantastic in that regard. Some of them not so much.
Right.
But I think getting back to sort of the idea of getting into the business, I guess the first question I would ask somebody, and look, this isn't a half-hour tutorial. We're just sort of spitballing on our own personal experiences. But the first thing I would ask someone is, what exactly do you want to do? Because doing play-by-play is a heck of a lot different than being an anchor, which is different than being a reporter, which is certainly different than being a weather anchor or a traffic anchor or, a sports versus news. There's so many different tracks, and those different tracks all have their own nuances in terms of, kind of where to go from here.
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest things I find is if you find out what you want to do, you're already ahead of the curve because now you can start watching people who are doing what you want to do. And often we don't know what we want to do. It's like, and it's not enough to say, I just want to be on TV. That's maybe a good start when you're 8. By the time you're 18 or, 21 or wherever you are, you should start narrowing it down and see if you can narrow it down to at least a few, because if you don't know what you want to do, then you're just spinning your wheels. Fred Zender, who was one of my first bosses at KTVU, told me you have to choose. You have to choose something you want to do, and you have to, and he's the one who made me get out of, I wanted to keep DJing on the radio, but I also had a job at KTVU. I worked at one of the radio stations playing records. Well, he said, you could do that, but I think that you have the talent to be in this business. You should just focus on television. And he was right. You can't, you spread yourself too thin, in my opinion. So you have to find out what you want to do.
So, and again, this is not, the idea of this podcast, for those who are just checking this out, it's going to be very sports centric, right? Sal, huge sports fan, right? I've been doing sports on TV and radio for a quarter century, so I think we have something to lend in that regard.
Absolutely,
and we'll get there. We'll sprinkle it in, but we wanted to jump off with just sort of our own experiences in this business, because we hope that might be of interest to some folks out there, whether you're trying to be a sportscaster, a traffic reporter, a weather anchor, or not, whether you're just interested in what goes on behind the scenes. So maybe we'll get into some of that. But my first question for you is, let's suppose you do have an 18-year-old kid who comes up to you and says, Sal, what's your best piece of advice for me to try and get into the business and do what you do? What would you tell them?
I think I already kind of gave it, and that is to make up your mind as to what you see yourself doing. Because once that mind is made up, and I didn't do that. I kind of wish I had earlier, because I was kind of dabbling in radio and this and that.
You'll figure it out at some point, though.
Right, you will figure it out. But if you can actually sit down and do the hard work of thinking about what it is you want to do, then all kinds of lights start going off in your head. So if the young man or young lady who comes up and says, I want to do what you do. I want to be a broadcast news journalist. I want to be this or that. I want to, I do want to tell stories on television. Figure that out, and then start talking to people in the business. But the hard part, Scotty, is, get away from, I just want to be on TV just to be famous, and start thinking about, what is it that I want to do? What stories do I want to tell? How do I want to tell them? Maybe you can eliminate things you don't want to do. That's a big one. Maybe you can look down the line and say, I'm 18 now, but when I'm 40, maybe you talk to someone who's older, am I going to want to be doing this? Really? And that's incredibly hard to do, is to make up your mind. I mean, I would ask you the same thing. You've been in this business for 25 years. When did you decide? Did you come to the conclusion that I want to do sports on television? Or did you just get into sports?
I came to the conclusion that I wanted to do sports on television. So first of all, to answer my own question, the best advice I give anybody is, if you want to be on air, go be on air as soon and as much as you possibly can. And whatever that entails, right? I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, hey, listen, people who are in college and they're doing internships, whatever. And like, I know a lot of people go to, small towns and go be on TV, but I was thinking, maybe I should, apply to be a production assistant, or I've got an opportunity to go to ESPN and be a production assistant and learn in that environment and this and that. And it's a no-brainer. Go to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and be on TV as soon as you possibly can.
It's a good call.
It is great. And if you don't have the option to do that, then by all means, go to ESPN, go to Fox Sports, go to, wherever you can, your local affiliate, intern, learn, take it all in. That's great, but there's no substitute for the actual experience. So that's my stock advice. But in terms of my own personal history, the short version is I was fortunate enough to have a broadcast journalism class in high school. And so I was a sports anchor.
That's pretty good. High school?
Yeah, it was a cable access. It's not like it was on, but it was in L.A. It was big public school in L.A. And we were very fortunate, right? I went to Beverly Hills High School. Okay. Full disclosure. Right?
Okay.
So you have
90210.
90210, although it was located in 90212, but that's irrelevant.
Okay. All right.
And so we had a broadcast journalism class, and I took it, and I thought, man, like, people get paid for this? This is fun, right? Yeah. So I went to college thinking, okay, if I find something that I like better, great. But honestly, what was I going to find that was more fun than doing sports highlights?
Sure.
Right? So, I was at Stanford. I did the student radio station. I did, wrote for the paper, the Stanford Daily, and then I got out of school and I realized, holy heck, what do I do now, right? I had some idea of the protocol, which back in the day, and it's changed a little bit, but back in the day was you put a resume tape together, right? It was not a reel, it was not digital, it was a physical, right?
A tape. Yeah.
And you'd send that tape out to, small market TV stations around the country and hope somebody would hire you. It is painful. The experience is painful. If you went to a Syracuse, a Missouri, even at Northwestern, there are schools that have these broadcast journalism programs that really prepare you. They tell you what you need to do, show you how to do it, and they get you on your way. And some of them are in small enough places like Syracuse where you can even do stuff at the local affiliate. You're not doing that, obviously, here in the Bay Area, right?
Nope.
You're not going to pop on KTVU as a 22-year-old college person
Nope.
to get your experience.
Nope.
So, it took me more than a year to find anybody willing to take me in. I sent tapes near and far. Anything. I drew the line at the Dakotas and Alaska, right? That was my standard. Anything other than North Dakota, South Dakota, or Alaska, I was sending out tapes. And please, news, weather, sports, it didn't matter. Just give me a shot. I know I can do this. I know I got some talent. Nobody cares, right? You don't even get responses most of the time.
Right.
I mean, every job, there's 300 applicants, right? They pay nothing. They've got 1 million people waiting around the block to do it. So I wound up getting my start in Panama City, Florida, because the news director there liked me enough and wanted to hire me, but couldn't hire me for the job he had because they needed a female. And I said, all right, I'm done with this. My parents are on board. I'm coming to Panama City. I'm going to come and just basically intern for you. And he's like, well, that's great, but it's illegal. We can't just have you working for free. He said it would have to actually be an internship. So I said, all right, I'll figure it out. So I got in the car. I drove to Gulf Coast Community College in Panama City, Florida with my Stanford master's degree, and I enrolled in community college for 1 degree of internship credit so that I could then go work for free at the local Fox affiliate in Panama City.
It is what it takes sometimes. Yeah. And you mentioned a couple things that stuck out. First of all, being in this business helps you get comfortable with rejection. There's so many people who will just not respond or tell you you're not the right fit. I was rejected many times. I was fired from jobs, not because I did something wrong, but you're not the sound we're looking for. A new program director came in radio. It's like, I want to bring this guy in, and you have to learn how to not take it personally. This is the kind of business that if you're listening right now to this podcast, you have to start getting good at hearing no a lot. And that's, a lot of people are okay with that, but if you start getting comfortable with hearing no. So that's one thing that stuck out. You did all this just to get your foot in the door, and that's what you have to do. Another thing is you mentioned market size, and I don't think people know what that is. I don't think that people know that in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, the cities where a lot of people live, there's no one on the air. I wouldn't say no one. Maybe there's been 1 or 2 people over the ages who comes on with no experience from another market or from somewhere else. I've seen people go from radio to television before, where they're big in the radio and then they get trained to do TV, but that's already because they're kind of known people. They know how to broadcast. That's happened. But not a 22-year-old college kid in a market like San Francisco, Boston, New York. There is a market size. Now, markets like 300 or so, you mentioned Nebraska. That's where that's where you can get an in. And then you move up market-wise. Ultimately, the biggest market is national, all right? So you were on ESPN, so you were on all over the place. I think people who are listening understand national, but it's a hierarchy, definitely.
So maybe to back it up just a smidge, when we say television market, metropolitan areas, areas to which certain TV stations' broadcast signal essentially reaches, right? They're broken up into markets, and they largely coincide with cities around the country, right? But there are a heck of a lot more cities. For instance, the Bay Area, Oakland, San Jose, San Francisco is a television market.
Correct.
Right? Los Angeles, Orange County is a television market. Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo is a television market.
Correct.
Right?
Seattle,
and they rank them, right? Seattle, Tacoma. They rank them from 1, which is New York City, to 200 and whatever. I don't know how many there are now. And so when we refer to small market television, and the way that, back in the day was mandatory and now is still probably the way most people go, is, your first job is in, Kearney, Nebraska, or Greenville, Mississippi, right? It's in one of these smaller TV markets where they're hiring entry-level folks. You're 23 years old, you look good on TV, you don't, swear a lot. Okay, we'll give you a shot,
Yeah.
From there, you graduate, you do a couple of years, and then you try and get a job in a mid-sized market, right? A Fresno, a Green Bay, that sort of thing. Work up to that next level. And eventually, ideally, you can decide I want to be in, big market TV in Florida or Texas or California, wherever's home for you, wherever you want to be. So that was sort of the progression. And in my day, that was it, right? You didn't have people hopping from social media or even really from radio, just, sideways onto big time TV.
Nope.
Now it's changed. There's a lot more avenues, but it's still sort of the basic method of going about to get where we are in terms of being at a KTVU or being at a large market affiliate is you got to start small. You got to make your mistakes. You got to deal with all the stuff you got to deal with. And if you're not willing to move around the country, you're going to have a much, much harder time getting to where you want to go, because not a lot of people get to roll out of bed in their hometown, start doing work on air, and go from there.
And that's how they weed people out. That's how they weed. Yeah. They part of that says a lot about you is that you were willing to do all this, and they know this. They know that they're going to weed people out. By the time you're in a mid-sized market, they know, okay, this person is committed, and we're doing this. And it doesn't mean you have to start doing your dream job right away, but I think your advice is very good. Is you need to get on the air as soon as, if you want to be an on-air person, you need to get on the air right now, as whoever will give you a shot.
TV is not a natural sport, right? Almost nobody, I'm not going to say nobody because I'm sure there are freaks of nature in every line of work and every aspect of life. But for the most part, nobody is really good at this right off the bat. You need reps and reps and reps and more reps. And even if you are one of the blessed few who might be able to sit in front of a camera, read a teleprompter, having never done it before, and actually look natural, which is almost impossible, how do you deal with that teleprompter breaking? How do you deal with somebody talking in your ear while you're trying to do a highlight? How do you deal with, the live shot going down while you're in the middle of a sentence and, coming back and stopping and starting when they say, oh, we got your back, go. Yeah, I mean, there are so many nuances of what we do.
Right.
And until you practice those 1,000 times, you cannot be great in this business.
Well, when you get to this market, they kind of figure that you already know how to do that.
Exactly.
You've already been through the live shot going down. I do a little bit of anchoring now. I anchor 1 hour a day, and that's happened to me now where I guess in the last week we had a live shot go down, and all of a sudden, you have to be paying attention. All of a sudden, up full on you, and you have to basically summarize what happened. These things have happened before, so when that happens to me now, as a guy who's been in this business for 25 years, it's not my first rodeo, and that's why they want you to go down to these markets and have those things happen to you, so that when you get up here, not everything. I mean, there's no possible way to expect everything, but you're going to expect a lot. Live shot going down is one of the most common. You're on the desk, you throw it to the live shot craps out. Now you're talking. The prompter operator hasn't turned the wheel fast enough. Now you just see blank, right? I mean, you and I have both been there where it's like, okay, here we are.
So I'll tell you one of my favorite small market TV stories of things that you have to deal with that you would never expect you have to deal with. The thing we put in your ear, right? It's called an IFB. Right. So viewers probably see it. You see the anchors and reporters. They got these things like Secret Service people, in their ears all the time. And I'm sure that, that's so that the people in the control room, right, producers, directors, can talk to us, ideally during commercial breaks, right, and not while we're actually
and
on
also
air.
So that you can hear what's on the air.
And you can hear what's on the air. If you're talking to a reporter who's at the stadium or who's, at the amusement park or, at the fire or the, wherever the live shot is, that's how you communicate, right? Well, what we take for granted in a place like the Bay Area is a mechanism called IFB interrupt, which is essentially the mechanism that allows, say, a producer or director to talk to only you. If they need to talk to Sal while Mike Meback or Garcia or anybody else is speaking, they can talk to you, and Mike and Gassia aren't going to hear it because they're busy, right?
Right,
They're delivering a story.
right.
So I was in Utica, New York, my second job. They didn't have this IFB interrupt system. What they had was essentially an intercom. So anytime the producer, the director, the tape operator, the master control person, the camera person, anybody had something to say, they would say it, and it would go into everybody's ears simultaneously.
Oh my goodness.
So picture trying to read a hard news story. And I was anchoring news back then, not sports. So you're doing a story about a double homicide, and you're trying to give the gory details of what's gone on. And you will hear people in your ear blabbering like, hey, how much time we got before the break? I think we got about 1:16. Okay. By the way, are we doing drinks after the show? Oh, yeah, we're going to go to here and this. Literally, they would have conversations while you were delivering the news.
Oh, my goodness.
So, these are things that they make you really good, and they really harden your ability to block out
Sure.
everything
Just keep
that's going
going.
on.
Just keep going.
But it's phenomenal, some of the things that you have to deal with in small market TV.
Yeah, well, and as you age into a job that is a more sophisticated outlet, you come with that experience, obviously. So the news directors already know. They don't have to ask you, have you ever had a live shot go down? They know. They know, right? They know this is what happens in the television business. Another thing that I always think about when people ask me, how do I get into this business? I ask them, why do you want to be in? What is it? Is it, and I hope they don't say, I just want to be on TV. I want to be famous. Right. Because
wrong reason.
It is, because that almost guarantees that you won't be.
Right. Well, the statistics almost guarantee that you won't be.
Right. There is always an exception. I know someone's right there screaming at their device right now saying, what about, and what about? But for the most part, the people who are really successful doing this are people who have a purpose, and you come to find out that they always wanted to do this, or they fell in love with this along the way, and it shows in the work. The people who just want to be famous because I want to be on TV, those people almost never get anywhere because they don't have the right mindset to do it, right? And this goes not only for television, this goes for acting, comedy. I think it goes for, you really have to want it. And that's hard. That's the hard work. Being famous is not a skill.
Just ask Paris Hilton. Oh wait, no, that's the opposite.
Even like, okay, keeping up with the Kardashians. There are exceptions in this new world that we live in.
In this world, there are,
and there's always an exception. There's a guy who came out of college and was on TV in New York City, maybe, perhaps. But really, don't play those odds. The odds are more in your favor if you go prepared. You're in it for the right reason, and you really want to do it.
So what's the best thing about your job right now?
I think the best thing about my job is that it's never boring. It's never boring to come to work and to listen to what's going on. This last year has been, I wouldn't say great, but it's been an eye-opening experience with everything that's happened. Not only in the world of news, but sports, everything. And to be at a TV station where, in a major market, where you have access to information, where everyone in the newsroom is, I would say, an educated person, and where you're working with a bunch of people who are intelligent and, for the most part, dedicated. When you get to this market, and you've worked in this market and you've worked at the national level, you don't find people mailing it in for the most part, do you? Uh-oh, that long pause. I have found
some people work harder than others.
I have found people mailing it in and they're out of the business. I remember I have found people mailing it in and they've been out of the business lots of times, either because
and that's usually what happens.
They sabotage themselves, or someone gets them out. And at KTVU that happened. I won't name names, but
go ahead.
I got to the station.
Throw them under the bus, man. Come on.
I got to the station. There were some people there who were obviously unhappy. And I've been there now for 25 years. Oof. I've seen people who are unhappy either by some sort of cosmic, they leave. And the people who are left over, the long timers, are people who come to work and they're happy. So the best thing about my job is I work with people who, for the most part, who care on long-term basis. There's always going to be that one guy or one gal who comes in who's miserable and, you kind of mailing it in, right? They don't last. I think the business is, like you said, it's a hard business, too hard on them.
And it's getting harder. And there's less tolerance for that. There is a next man up mentality that exists even at the highest levels now, right? There are very few people in TV news and sports who are deemed irreplaceable.
Right.
There are still some, right? But there are fewer and fewer. And if you are a malcontent, if you don't work hard, it will come back to bite you.
I've seen it catch up with people.
It will.
You and I have both been around long enough to know that when you're young, you realize, why is this person who has obviously got a bad attitude getting all this? And then you don't have to say much, and then you kind of realize that doesn't last.
No. But it's, it's your point about it's never boring. I think, that's a big part of it. Not a lot of people, I don't want to say not a lot of people, but too many people do not look forward to going to work, right? It's a job. For us, it's fun.
Yeah.
I do, calling the games for Stanford. I mean, are you kidding me? I love game day. There's nothing better for me than waking up knowing I get to go call a Stanford football game or a basketball game today, right? It's
Absolutely.
a blast,
Right.
Doing KTVU, nothing better than getting up knowing I get to go cover a Warriors playoff game today, right? I mean, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So, look, the perks are what they are. We wouldn't all do it if it wasn't awesome. But by the same token, there's a lot of hard work, and you got to deal with just as much crap in our line of work as probably most anybody else's.
I did forget one thing that I would say that both of us do that we take for granted, and that is if you want to be in this business, you have to learn how to write. Because, there's a specific thing when it comes to writing a piece for television. It's called a package. I don't know if you're listening, you don't know what TV a lot, but a package is basically a recorded news story that you write words. I'm having trouble saying it.
You need me to write the words for you?
Yes, please. So there's no prompter here. You write sentences, you include sound bites, and you put it together, and that gives people something to go to. It's a recorded piece. Now, any TV, ESPN, news, you will see pre-recorded pieces where people go and they do a story and they put it together. It's pre-recorded. You're not doing it live. You have to learn how to write that. You have to learn how to write.
To me, there is no more important skill than writing in what we do. It's not universal, especially in sports. There are a lot of sports guys who are very talented. They have great camera presence. They're great on TV. They know sports, all the things that make them, and they're adored, and they're very successful, but who can't write.
Right.
For me, that has always been the backbone of everything that I have done. My personal thing, it's not shtick. It's not loud and, jumping down your throat and over the top. My thing is I am a storyteller. Anything that I do, whether it is writing a package, whether it's doing a live shot, or whether it's a lead into a Giants-A's game, there's always a story to be told. And that may be a 15-second story leading into the highlights, but there's still a story. I will never pop on camera and say, hey, Giants A's at the stadium, let's go to the highlights. That's not me, right? There will be 12 seconds of something substantive that sets it up, right? That I hope makes it interesting, even if you're not a baseball fan, but you're watching. You might say, oh, wow, that guy's pitching, against his hometown team. Something simple, right? Or, that guy's, his parents are in the stand and he hasn't seen them for 5 years because he came over from Cuba. Just something that makes it interesting to a broader audience. I think that is a huge, huge skill to have.
What I did when I realized I wanted to be in television is I started paying attention to the written word. For example, I wanted to be maybe a news reporter. I would take a newscast and get a package and transcribe it. Oh, it's like 2 sentences, a soundbite, 2 more sentences, a soundbite. Yeah. Once that mystery is gone, listen to any ESPN package if you're thinking of being in sports. When they go to the pre-recorded piece, you have a DVR now, back it up, write the words down, write the quotes down, and you realize the body of, and then you realize, gosh, this is 8 sentences and 3 quotes.
And that's another skill. And our fine producer, Mr. Toops, can tell you, because he has worked with me on hundreds of features, at KTVU at this point, how much emphasis I put on trying to not be the story. My job when I'm doing this as a reporter, when I'm telling a story, is to the greatest extent possible, let the sound bites talk. Let the people you're interviewing talk, because that's what it makes a piece. My job is to weave it all together. And if I can do that in 2 sentences instead of 4, that's much better. we just chop 20 seconds, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's craft.
Yeah.
Really, it is craft. And if you start taking pride in it, I mean, there's so many levels, right? So I think we've established that both of us really love our gigs. I never get up in the morning saying, gosh, I got to go to work. The only thing I get up in the morning and say is, it's too early.
Yeah.
Damn it. But that's a different
That's
thing.
a whole nother story.
That's a different
I don't know how
thing.
you do what you do, just the hours
But
of it.
once I'm there,
Sure. Yeah.
this morning we rolled in. Everyone, is doing their job very professionally. I'm grateful to be where I am, and I know that we've both been in this business for 25 years. It's been a decent ride so far.
And you know what? There's still more to come. And look, I think that we will make every effort to weave personal experience throughout this. Again, this is. If you're just checking this out for the first time, first of all, thank you. We appreciate it. Hopefully we said something that resonated with somebody. It'd be a lot of sports talk, life in general, and anything that pops into our heads. We'll have guests. We're lining them up, and we should have a pretty good roster of guests in the coming weeks, so that'll be fun.
And we're doing this in a really cool room. Have I said that this podcast yet?
No, we set it up in week 1, but we're in the Sports Cave, which can't be the name of the podcast, but does sort of describe exactly where we are with the pool table.
We even have a photographer here today.
We got a photographer. We got we got publicity photos. This is going to be.
We're living right. We're living right.
Maybe we will be famous after this, Sal.
Maybe
your dreams can
don't
come true.
count on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, appreciate y'all, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again next week.